family's not normal. Yes, there are the normal abnormalities, but there are also some particularly strange things about my family. We're weird. I suppose I can take some comfort in the fact that my family was strange long before I came into the picture. This is not to say that I'm perfectly normal. I'm not. But frankly, compared to my dad's family, anyone seems normal. For one thing, my dad's parents were older when they had him, and that made things difficult. Not that older parents can't raise healthy children, they absolutely can, but my grandparents were really old when they had him. Like, really old. There was also the fact that when my dad was a kid, my grandfather, a very religious man who had to know him, thought that God wanted him to sacrifice my dad. Long story short, God apparently stepped in at the last minute and saved my dad from the chopping block. But as you might imagine, that added some tension to a house in which there was already plenty of tension. You see, my grandmother had a really hard time getting pregnant, and in the meantime, my grandfather married another woman and had a child with her. It's not what you think. My grandmother knew all about it, but nevertheless, it made for some awkward family dinners. All of that to say, for a guy whose name means laughter, there wasn't much of it in my dad's house growing up. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that we had some hard times as well. Now you think that God almost having you killed when you were little would turn you off from religion for good, but the opposite proved true for my dad. Instead, he took on the faith of his father and saw himself as continuing to live out that calling that God had placed on our family line. I always remembered my dad being so proud that we were the family that God chose. So you can imagine his distress when my mom had trouble getting pregnant. Fortunately for him, he had learned that from his dad that marrying another woman and having a child with her doesn't work out so well. So he took another route. He prayed to God for help. And fortunately for me, his prayers worked. Shortly after my dad prayed, my mom became pregnant with my brother and me. That's right. I'm a twin. People always ask me, isn't it great to be a twin? And I always respond, no. Absolutely not. For some it might be, but it's definitely not for me. My brother and I didn't get along from the beginning. My mom always said that my brother and I were fighting before we were even born. So much so, in fact, that she finally prayed to God, if it is to be this way, why do I live? Let's just say that wasn't the last time she would ask that question. But as far as I know, that's the only time she got a response. As she tells it, she heard God speak to her. 2 nations are inside your womb. The 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. One shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. As you might imagine, knowing the sort of weird things that God has asked of my relatives, and then being born into a prophecy like this has made me skeptical of God from the beginning, especially because I was the older son, which meant that I was the one who was destined by God to serve my younger brother, which if you had met my younger brother, you would know why it was such a problem. He was deceitful, lazy, and did I mention deceitful? Anyway, I came out first, and I was apparently red and hairy, yes, so they called me Esau. Later they would call me Edom. To be honest, I don't think my brother really ever got over the fact that he wasn't born first. He came out grabbing my ankle as if to pull me back in so that he could be first, and so they called him Jacob. If he'd known the prophecy, he'd been really happy with his placement, but apparently he didn't, so he was born second and wanted to be first from the beginning. After people asked, they typically ask if we're fraternal or identical. But this is only people who haven't seen us. Those who have seen us know right away that we are fraternal. We look nothing alike. I kept my red-faced hairiness my entire life, and my brother kept his sweet baby face as well. But it wasn't just our looks that made us different. No, we didn't do any of the same things. I liked to hunt and be out in the fields helping to provide for our family while he sat inside plotting with my mother. That's the thing. Each of us had a parent who really liked us. On one hand, I had my father. We got along great from the beginning. We liked the same things. We both liked to hunt and be outside. And there was also the fact that I was his firstborn and therefore his heir. And on the other hand, my brother had my mom. I don't think my mom liked me from the beginning. In our house, there definitely was a Team Jacob. Maybe it's because I was the big hairy one and she could blame me for her troubled pregnancy. I don't know, but I always knew that she liked Jacob more than me. She would dote on him and craft ways for him to get the better of me. That was really hard. Like I said, weird family. Looking back on it, it wasn't really fair the way either of our parents treated us. Which is why I've tried with my own children to show them each that I love them. I might not do the same things with each of them, and trust me, they are not the same people, but they each know that I love them. After all, I know what can happen if they don't at least know that. I guess if I'm totally honest, I have to admit that my father's lack of affection really did bother Jacob, and I knew it. Just as my mother's lack of affection bothered me. I knew it, but I didn't do anything about it. In fact, I probably perpetuated it. The truth is, I wasn't very kind to my younger brother. I threw the fact that I was firstborn in his face more than was probably fair. I guess what I'm saying is that now I know that then I was really cocky. I was looking out for me. I thought because I was out in the fields with my dad hunting and my brother was inside with my mom that I was somehow better than him. Which of course led to the incident. I still remember it pretty clearly. I'd been out in the fields all day long trying to outdo all of the other hands in how much I could do. I'd worked harder than anyone else that day, and I was feeling great, if a little hungry and tired. You see, I hadn't taken a break all day. I'd worked right through, wanting to prove to everyone that I was man enough that I didn't need a break. So by the end of the day, after the people had patted me on the back for working so hard, I was hungry. Like, really hungry. Now, I've learned in years since that we often do unhealthy things when we are hungry or angry or tired. In that moment, I was two of them and about to become a third. I walked into the tent where I learned later that my brother had also been working all day, preparing some delicious smelling stew, and I demanded some food. I said, "Let me have some of that red stuff. I'm famished." Now I'll admit, I could have a prep shirt that said, "Please." Or at least ask him how his day was going or whatever. But I was tired and hungry and it was family, so I just demanded some food. sell his birthright for a cup of soup. Right? Touché. Anyway, I was too full of myself in the moment to quite know how to respond, so I just said, I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? An exaggeration, I know, but you have to know how my brother got under my skin to know why I answered like that. I was already hungry, and now he was making me angry. My friend calls that meme hangry. And when I'm hangry, I'll say just about anything I can to get what I want. Plus, I thought he was joking. He always had to rub it in my face that he was smarter than me. From the time we were kids, I was always the dumb brute, and he was the smart kid. I worked in the fields, and he stayed in and thought. I hated that. He responded, swear to me first. Swear to him. I knew right then that he wasn't joking. And my initial impulse was to deck him. But that would prove that I was just the dumb ox that he thought I was. No, not this time. This time I wanted to show him that I wasn't afraid of him, that I wasn't going to be pushed around by him, and so I did it. I swore to him and I sold him my birthright. For a long time I pretended like I'd been tricked into it. And maybe it's easier for people to understand it that way. But I knew what I was doing. I knew it. I didn't quite know why, but I knew what I was doing. I sold my birthright. Do you want to know what really bugs me? The stew wasn't nearly as good as it smelled. Way too much lentil. But nobody ever mentions that. They just say that I despised my birthright. Here's the thing. My brother was no saint. My brother was no saint. Later, he tricked a blessing out of my dad by wearing goat spurs and pretending to be me. I didn't know whether to be more offended by the fact that after getting my birthright, my brother also stole a blessing from me, or that my dad didn't know the difference between a goat and me. I mean, come on, I'm hairy, but not that hairy. So my brother wasn't perfect. But neither was I. You know, that day I sold my birthright was the beginning of a really, really hard time in my life. I'd given up everything. Everything that had been promised to me, and had to restart on my own without any of the resources that I had anticipated from my family. I was shamed by friends and family, and I was bitter for a really long time. I spent more time than was healthy plotting how I would get back at my brother. I even plotted to kill him until I realized that that would just prove everyone right. I finally realized that for as angry and as tired as I was, I just needed to let go and live my own life. You know, looking back on it, I think my family dysfunction had been such a burden on me for so long that I'd do anything to let it go. Maybe that's why I did it. I couldn't change the fact that my mom didn't really like me or that my brother was an ankle grabber, but I could work on me. And so that's what I did. I stepped outside of dysfunction started to work on myself, and eventually on my own family. You know, the funny thing was that when I did that, I finally started to realize why God had always been so important to my family. You see, when you do really stupid things and make really poor decisions over and over again, people tend to distance themselves from you. People leave. But God doesn't. In other words, God is there even in our hangriest moments and loves us in spite of it. That's good news. Later in life, after I had established my own family and done my best to put all this mess behind me, I received word that my brother was lost and defeated and was in need of some help. And so I went to him. And when he heard that I was coming out to meet him on the journey, he assumed that because all of his ankle-grabbing ways, I was going to take advantage of the fact that he was down on his luck and finally let him have it once and for all. And so he sent hosts with gifts and servants to appease my supposed anger. But when I met him, I just embraced him. And I gave him the help he needed. Guess I realized that the birthright I sold the day of the incident was about property and land and titles within our strange little family. But that I kept my true birthright. I kept a birthright that, as hard as I might try, I could never sell. What I realized finally, after having been through all of this, was that I was part of a bigger family. I'm part of a bigger family for whom it doesn't matter my size, or my hairiness, or my order of birth, or how hangry I can sometimes get. I am always going to be a part of that family. Friends, I learned that I am a child of God. That I am as you are, a child of God. Which means that now I learn to take some pride in the fact that my family